In a post commemorating the life of Lindsey Graham, FBI Director Kash Patel said his bureau is assisting local authorities and has made every necessary resource available, which is weird because the late senator died from natural causes and authorities do not suspect foul play. Patel may have already been on thin ice heading into the weekend. Sources tell MS Now that on Friday, top Trump officials were so disturbed by a range of Patel's actions that they summoned him to the White House for an emergency meeting to course correct, although it's unclear if those two things are linked. Joining us, MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard, managing editor of The Bulwark, and MS Now contributor Sam Stein. Stu Stevens still with us, which is good news. All right, so help me understand this reporting regarding Patel. We'll leave Graham to the side for a moment and talk to me about why Patel was summoned to the White House. Vaughn.
There's multiple reasons, and our understanding from our reporting is that there is growing frustration with the FBI director on a multitude of fronts, and that there have been, we're told, past interventions by folks close to Patel to try to get him to correct course with this White House. He has drawn intense scrutiny over the perceived lavish spending of not only the FBI and the transportation, but also for example, jet ski excursions when he is out on official business. And on Friday, we were told that he was actually set to go out on an official trip to Chicago, where his girlfriend happened to be performing later on that evening. And that on Friday, that trip was promptly canceled, and instead, Kash Patel made his way back to the White House amid this level of scrutiny. Of course, this also came after hours in which subpoenas were issued to New York Times reporters over a leak investigation related to their reporting on the Qatari jet Air Force One. But for Kash Patel, this is mounting pressure, we are told, in frustration with his performance here at the helm. And over the course of now a year and a half in which he has been given a long leash to do extensive work, but not always is delivering on the demands, and instead drawing scrutiny around some of the spending coming out of his office.
Yeah, so what is it? Is it that he's not delivering on the demands? And if so, what are those demands? Or is it that he's attracting all these bad headlines? Vaughn.
It's all of this here, Katie. Our reporting as to exactly why he was called back on Wednesday, the precise reason is not clear. But what we do know is that he has drawn a great frustration within the White House, and that to a great extent he is in trouble with his current position. Now, of course, we have heard that he has drawn the ire of the White House and that his job prospects in the future were on the line, but he has continued to stick around here. And so I think that is where, when you're looking at Kash Patel here moving forward, you know, we were told by somebody close to the White House who had been really watching this all unfold, questioning why that there were conversations among folks at the White House and in Trump's orbit about why Kash Patel was going to be going to Chicago on whether it be official business or to see his girlfriend perform in concert, at the same time that there was reporting that the president had new intelligence to suggest that Iran had new threats on his life. And at the same time that Iran was in the middle of war, and it was suggested to us, why was Kash Patel not sitting at the White House ready to go inside of the Situation Room? Why was he continuing to put these and prioritize these types of trips, even if they are for formal business, as the FBI suggests is the foremost concern of his? Why, under these circumstances, is he continuing to move forward at such a time like this of national security
implications? Why might Kash Patel, Sam, why might he feel that he can do all these things, that he doesn't need to be tethered to the White House, that he can use the FBI jet and go see his girlfriend perform concerts? Why would he feel that sort of freedom?
I feel like that's a rhetorical question. The answer, obviously, is that because he reports to one person who wants him there, and that's Donald Trump. And Kash Patel is an ally. He'll do what Donald Trump asks him to do. The FBI has launched, obviously, politically motivated investigations. And in return, Trump gives him a leash. Look, I think it's fair to say that we're in unprecedented waters here with the FBI and Kash Patel specifically. It's not every day that you have these politically motivated investigations. It's not every day you have an FBI director who shows up at the locker room of the men's U.S. Olympics hockey team drowning beers, right? Like, this is different stuff. But he's doing what Trump wants him to do, which allows him to get a little bit of a leeway. Not saying that he's not in trouble, right? I mean, he's causing a lot of headaches. The expenditures are embarrassing. The flights, the use of the jet, especially when he was on record prior to serving in the FBI, criticizing heads of the FBI for their use of the jet. That's embarrassing too. It's hypocritical. Even the tweet around Lindsey Graham was so unnecessarily provocative. You would never imagine something like that. And just the way he responds to the reporting, pointing out that his jet ski is gold-plated, I mean, it's absurd stuff. But again, to your question, so long as Trump is in his corner, he's going to be fine.
There's a dismissiveness. Yeah, his answer was, I have a gold-plated, my jet ski is gold-plated, ... and then calls the reporter dumb blank. I won't say it on TV. Let's talk about the Lindsey Graham post and what it implies, Stu. He seems to imply that there was something nefarious going on with Lindsey Graham's death, saying the FBI is assisting local authorities and has made every necessary resource available. What sort of resource might need to be available to investigate a aortic dissection, Stu?
You know, at a certain point, asking why a ridiculous, not serious, not very smart person does ridiculous things is sort of like, how can you know? I mean, this is just who Kash Patel is. I mean, I think, you know, my dad was an FBI agent. I think if you had a vote among drug dealers, pedophiles, human traffickers, who their favorite FBI director would be, it's Kash Patel. Because he's just diverting so many of these resources. He should be going after these really horrible people to Donald Trump's whims. There's 250 agents. That's a lot of human beings, well-trained, a lot of money invested in them. In Georgia, going after the Georgia ballots, well, there's nothing there. That just means 250 FBI agents aren't going out and doing their job. The same with the Seashell conspiracy, all of this. And yet he still can't deliver one indictment on Epstein. Look, I think this guy is an embarrassment. Even at a certain point, there might be some embarrassment factor inside the White House. And, you know, the reality is Donald Trump can find a less embarrassing human being who will do exactly what he says. So why not?
I wonder if the tweet about Lindsey Graham or the investigation into reporting that they don't like, the New York Times reporters, et cetera, Sam, is that to protect his position? Is that because he thinks that's what the president wants in light of this summons to the White House last week?
It's actually a really good question. How much of this is motivated because he's trying to interpret Trump's desires and get ahead of them? How much of this is just Kash Patel doing things he wants to do that happen to align with Donald Trump? I don't really know the answer to that. I couldn't possibly get into his head. But I will say this. Putting aside the New York Times stuff, the tweet about Lindsey Graham and the FBI investigating it, you can make the case that Kash Patel was sort of raised politically in this kind of conspiratorial milieu, and he's part of it. He certainly has a lengthy history of going on podcasts and pushing conspiracy theories, including around the Epstein stuff, we should know. So it doesn't necessarily shock the mind that he, you know, may dive into these waters. And I also just say this, there's been conspiracies around the deaths of prominent officials in the past. When you go back just to Antonin Scalia's death in 2016, there was conspiracies instantaneously about that. So that's not new either. What's new here is that someone who believes these things or is doing them for the benefit of his boss now has one of the highest law enforcement positions in the country with numerous agents that he can deploy at his whim. And it appears a fairly lengthy leash from the president of the United States. That's what's new here.